It's 8:05 in Vancouver. We continue our morning coffee today on Vera Radio at 96.1 frequency modulation in Vancouver, in Toronto, in Calgary. Joining us is our morning guest, public and political figure, entrepreneur Denis Yelisevic. Denis, good morning to you. We're glad to see you, glad to hear you, and thank you for once again finding the time to talk with us.
Good morning, Ivan. Hello.
Thank you. Denis, well, probably, as I already mentioned, in my opinion, actually, during the week that we haven't talked, quite a lot of events have happened again, and there is definitely something to talk about, although it would seem that nothing supernatural has happened. However, still here and there, I think quite a lot has happened. But I would probably like to start in chronological order, yes. These are the negotiations between Donald Trump and Volodymyr Zelensky in your area, in Mar-a-Lago. How do you assess these negotiations, and including that very phone conversation between Donald Trump and Vladimir Putin? As I understand it, before the start of these negotiations with Volodymyr Zelensky, what do you have to say about all this?
Well, Trump had phone negotiations with Putin both before and after. People now, of course, let me tell you, are panicking a little in Ukraine. They were expecting, well, some kind of clear breakthrough, that Trump and Zelensky would come out and say, we've reached an agreement, now there's a ceasefire, here's the plan. That didn't happen. There were some hints given, some behind-the-scenes agreements were made. According to my information, Trump insists on elections in May 2026. So I had this information earlier, but now it's more or less starting to reach the press, and it was announced following the results of this meeting. I also know what mood Zelensky went there with, meaning he went there with the goal of disrupting the negotiations, sabotaging everything, and delaying as much as possible. Zelensky's task is to string Trump along until the midterm elections in the United States, and he hopes that, of course, Trump will lose them. Well, the Republicans will lose them. And again, give us money, give us weapons, we'll fight again, but it's unclear with whom and with what. I also know that Zelensky doesn't have any kind of long-term real strategy. So it's like either we fight for 5 or 10 years or we hold elections tomorrow. He just has a situational approach. Like today, how do I stay in power? How do I dodge all the troubles? That's how we're going to act. Also, the National Anti-Corruption Bureau of Ukraine searched deputies from Zelensky's party just a day before Mar-a-Lago. Criminal cases are ongoing, with details set to be published next week. So, well, not only I, but many others have openly talked about this already. Members of the Verkhovna Rada work for under-the-table salaries, for cash. A standard average deputy gets $5,000 a month. Someone who is very obedient and votes as needed, especially on high-profile bills, gets $10,000 to $30,000 a month.
By the way, speaking of the National Anti-Corruption Bureau of Ukraine, I watched that very interview with Mr. Mindich yesterday. I don't know if you had a chance to do that.
Yes.
Quite something. Well, let's say we'll get back to it a bit later so we don't mix everything together right now. Again, since we've already started with the chronology, yes. Right before these negotiations, the figure of 95% was mentioned very clearly, that almost everything had been agreed upon, just a few details left, 95% except for the territories. When they start saying except for the territories, it means the United States and Ukraine had reached an agreement. Yes, but everyone understands that today, no matter how we feel about it, everything depends on Putin, on Russia. That's why, well, everyone understands perfectly. So what do you think? What is all this for? In my opinion, even a person who, let's say, isn't deeply involved or doesn't dive into these issues, and even then, I think he understands that without the territorial questions, yes, basically, there's no point in all these talks, negotiations. 95% of everything is already decided. They simply don't exist. The way Putin says it will be, that's how it will be.
Well, not exactly, because Zelensky also influences a lot of things. If that weren't the case, the situation wouldn't be the way it is today. So Trump said this in open sources. After the meeting, he said, I'm ready to come to Ukraine and speak to parliament or the people to convince everyone it's necessary, let's be blunt, to leave Donbass. That's the right way to say it. To leave Donbass. You recall earlier discussions about the referendum. Today, it has already been officially announced that work is underway on an electronic referendum system. A second option, which fully satisfies Putin, is also being discussed: for parliament to approve the exit from Donbass. I'm not sure if it's legal, as the constitution doesn't allow it. The constitution doesn't allow giving up or exchanging territories, but withdrawing troops seems permitted. At least that's how I see it. I haven't discussed this topic in detail with lawyers yet, and the parliament makes this decision. Now let's add here what we just said about the searches of deputies for understanding. I understand that it's hard to explain to people who aren't deeply involved in the process. Zelensky has a single-party majority in parliament, and when criminal cases are opened against these deputies of Zelensky by the National Anti-Corruption Bureau of Ukraine, by the Anti-Corruption Agency, this single-party majority falls apart. In other words, there are enough compromised deputies who have to do what America says in order not to go to jail, roughly speaking, and then the parliament will vote the way it needs to in order to end the war. This kind of scheme is also being worked out, and it works. I can tell you, well, for me to hear that Trump is ready to come to America, that's fantastic. There's terrible hate against Trump in Ukraine. Everyone insults him, they curse at him, call him all sorts of names. Trump is blamed for everything in Ukraine today.
By the way, I think yesterday the television channel Dozed gave me numbers from independent American polls. Right now, I can't name those institutes or the exact numbers, but about 65% of surveyed Americans believe that Ukraine should be supported the way, let's say, Biden did, that is, by supplying it with weapons. And 35%, I think that was the number, do not support Donald Trump in the policy he is currently pursuing toward Ukraine. So generally speaking, to sum it all up, ordinary Americans, on the contrary, actually want and strive for America to provide more help to Ukraine in this case. And probably the reaction of Ukrainians, well, I think it's understandable, isn't it?
No, because Trump is trying to end the war while Biden was fueling it. I don't trust Dozh's questions. They're like cable news networks.
No, these aren't Dozh's polls. Dozh is just reporting them.
He rebroadcasted it, I get it. But who is he rebroadcasting? Not the right wing. He rebroadcasts where his support comes from. United States Agency for International Development, a non-governmental group. I call them grant eaters. They live off grants.
Quite possible.
They will publish things that fuel the war while pretending to be the liberal Russian opposition. This is not an opposition at all. These are warmongers, and war is beneficial to them. They serve this topic with their information. In all the time I've been in America, I've seen 3 or 4 people tell me that they support Biden's policies. It really depends on the state. I'm in the Republican state of Florida. In California, maybe 50% really do support this, but overall, from what I see, and as much as I talk to people, the vast majority are against it. Biden wasn't helping Ukraine, Biden was fueling the war, and now giving money and weapons to Ukraine, and Zelensky is fueling the war. As cynical and harsh as it may sound, I understand these are very unpleasant words. We need to end the war, and every action should be evaluated through that lens. Will money and weapons end the war? No, they'll just be stolen and prolong the conflict, causing the mobilization of 18-year-olds, more grief and more casualties. It's just that propaganda has now made Ukraine unwilling to accept reality. And the reality is that we've lost Crimea and Donbass. We've lost Crimea and Donbass. Now we need to consider how to live without them. Here's a suggestion for becoming a successful country. It's useful for politicians to spend another decade claiming we'll regain Crimea and Donbass. Dennis, I'll tell you, when Putin annexed Crimea from us, at first there were political talk shows about Crimea. Well, you probably know Savik Schuster.
Yes, of course.
That was the biggest show. The second one was on Kolomoisky's channel. On 1+1, it was called Pravo na Vladu, or Right to Power in Russian. And there were always politicians coming, a crowd, about 20 people would come to the show, to these talk shows and say, we will get Crimea back. We will make life in Ukraine so good that the Crimeans themselves will want to come back to us. What do we see? 11 years have passed, almost 12 now, and we are living worse. We have a terrible war. We have a dictatorship.
Well, let's be honest, hand on heart. Although I'll admit honestly, I'm not a supporter of what happened with Crimea. But even before the war, we had guests from Crimea. and they were actually comparing what was happening before, so to speak, the annexation and after the annexation. For me, to be honest, let's say legally, well, of course, that doesn't mean much, but in terms of how people are treated, probably, yes, it really does matter. Zelensky himself admitted this isn't his fault, but the previous authorities, that, well, Crimea was simply abandoned. I mean, well, so to speak, they squeezed everything they could out of it, but gave it nothing in return, so people were very dissatisfied. It was exactly during this period, and so to speak, well, we often have the journalist Oleg Kashin visiting us. What is he accused of? Why are they? Many people say that he is a supposedly pro-Russian journalist, a Z patriot, and so on. Because once Kashin said, first of all, he was in Crimea at that time when, let's say, the polite people were doing what they were doing. And he was just saying that even if, let's say, there had been a referendum according to all the rules and laws, it's quite possible that the people of Crimea would have voted for joining Russia anyway, because, well, things weren't going very well. Can you confirm that or not? I mean, before the war, before 2014, before the annexation, things in Crimea weren't all that great.
I hate to admit it, but I think even if Putin held the referendums peacefully, the result would have been the same. Of course, the result wouldn't have been as convincing in terms of percentages, but it still would have been in favor of joining Russia. That's true. I don't need anyone else's input. I can tell you from a historical perspective. I mean, if there had been such an attempt, Putin wouldn't have even tried if he didn't understand the devastation in Crimea. You can't seize a prosperous territory. People won't allow it. There would have been fierce resistance, but there was none. So that's the truth. As for the current situation, several of my acquaintances had to travel through Crimea due to forced circumstances, and all of Crimea is Z and V, ZV. That's it. It's all Z supporters, 90%. Right now, I'm really bothered by the statements of the leaders of the Crimean Tatars, the Mejlis, because they come out and say we need a representative of the Crimean Tatars in the negotiation group. That's Krustam Umarov, a Crimean Tatar. That's the first thing. Second, what else is needed? Why wasn't there the kind of resistance that was needed? I say this with respect for the Crimean Tatar people. I believe Crimea is theirs. But this can't continue. They need new leaders. Religious leaders and other older people currently in place should be replaced by young people who accept reality.
Speaking about holding referendums and presidential elections, there was information that quite possibly, of course, it's not 100% confirmed. Maybe you have more information on this? Valery Zaluzhny is planning to leave his post as ambassador in London and come back to Kiev.
Yes, that information did come through. I'll tell you, just to keep track of the sequence. It was first published by Radio Novoye Vremya, and there's also the Novoye Vremya YouTube channel. It belongs to Tomas Fiala. Tomas Fiala is a businessman of Czech origin, a billionaire, owner of Dragon Capital, an investment company in Ukraine with huge assets in Ukraine. He is connected with Soros and the globalists. As I understand it, this information was either meant as a blow to Zelensky and is true, or they leaked it to test the waters, to study the reaction and see how people would respond to it. So all we can do is wait. They say it should happen on the 4th or 5th of January. If that happens, then let's say the candidates officially enter the presidential campaign, the presidential race.
Thank you, Denis. My colleague Alexandra Gerson is joining us. Sasha, hello, good morning.
Oh, hello.
Hello.
Good afternoon, Denis Yelisevich. Hello, Denis Manzar, and good morning to everyone. Good afternoon, good evening. First, that's not exactly right since you started talking. Denis, I congratulate you on your recent birthday.
Thank you.
I wish you health, good luck, and well-being. I want you to live where you want and the way you want. And if all of this happens, there will be health, luck, and a good mood. You already seem happy when I see and talk to you, but I want to make you feel even better. Double it, triple it, as much as possible.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
Happy birthday, dear Denis. Well, you just started talking about Crimea, and I can't be indifferent to that, so to speak, because I'm from Crimea myself, and it's incredibly interesting to me. And when you talked about the Crimean Tatars and how they behave today, I want to, and you mentioned the word Mejlis, and that's Rifat Chubarov. I don't know if he's still involved in this or not, but I remember that once we had a guest, a journalist from Russia. Dennis, you remember the one who moved to Crimea? I forgot. I remember his name is Alexander. And back then he started saying strange things, but we didn't know him well. We invited this person as a journalist from Echo, and suddenly he said something like that. If it were Stalin, the Crimean Tatars should thank Stalin for only deporting them and not shooting them all. It was absolutely terrible, and I was shocked by such a comment and tried to somehow calm him down. I didn't manage to do it very well, and literally a short time later I received a letter, and Rifat Chubarov was involved with this letter. And those who lead the Mejlis, as well as the Crimean Tatars of Canada, wrote that they were incredibly outraged by this. What happened? They demand that this person should never be there again and that we should never invite him again. But I remember this situation very well, Dennis. So, when the whole Crimea is ours thing starts, you said today, this is the first time I've heard it put this way, and I think you're absolutely right. You said if it were a prosperous, thriving region, so to speak, everything would have been different. And really, it was a complete mess there at the time. Well, I mean, before the 90s, because I had already left in 1990, I don't know what it was like there.
After that, it was the same, maybe even worse, I assure you, but that had already been published.
Well, yes, and you said that if it had happened at that time, during those elections or at another time, the result would have been the same, right?
Crimea would have chosen Russia, just not by such a large majority as it did under pressure.
Yes, I think so, because today those living in Crimea, I know many, including former classmates, I can't say that they're very upset that it's Russia today and not Ukraine. I'm only talking about the people who live there and those I've spoken with. There aren't hundreds or thousands, maybe just 3 to 5 people. Of course, I'm not going to make any serious decisions based on them, but still. Look, I want to ask you something. Dennis asked you a question about 95%, right? When I was preparing for this show, for this conversation with you, I also received a question. One question was, if a peace plan is 90 or 95% ready, why haven't Ukrainians seen the last 5 or 10%? Are those the hardest parts, or is there another reason?
And they won't show them.
And they won't show them?
Because it resets Zelensky's political rating. And Zelensky's style is to put on a brave face in a bad situation. That is to wrap something bad in a pretty package and try to sell it to the gullible population.
Tell me, aren't the talks about security guarantees turning into something else? Because that was the main thing Volodymyr Zelensky talked about as a justification for an endless war with no clear timeline?
Maybe you could say that, but the security guarantees were more interesting. Trump said, "We are ready to give Ukraine ironclad guarantees for 15 years. I heard that and was thrilled. I understand. Putin won't be Russia's president in 5 years. He'll still be alive, but at 90, he won't be president. And it's also questionable whether he'll even be physically alive." Then Zelensky says we need 30, 40, or 50. You know, it's like when someone comes out and says, "Yeah, that's all, but for this, give us 16, please. 15 won't do, but 16 will." That's pure politics.
All right, then tell me this. Why does Volodymyr Zelensky talk about a referendum on the territories, but at the same time says there will be no concessions? So tell me, does that sound like mutually exclusive concepts, or am I misunderstanding?
It only seems that way. He means, I won't give in to you on anything, but now I'm going to shift the responsibility for all of this onto the people or the parliament and let them pass whatever they want. I'm not to blame for it. Guys, I've been asking for weapons and money for 4 years. I haven't slept. I've done everything for you. I didn't run away. Vote for me.
Well, yes, then here's a question for you. Doesn't it seem like the negotiations are being used more to hold on to power than for real peace?
For Zelensky, that's exactly right.
If the United States has reduced its aid by dozens of times, doesn't that mean that the West's faith in Volodymyr Zelensky's strategy is to some extent declining?
No, we can't call the West a single country. Today, the West is diverse and not a unified entity as Putin claims. America halted all aid long ago. Now they give only about $700 million a year through an old program. That's nothing. It only lasts 3 days. Trump is not going to give Zelensky any aid. NATO is selling some weapons for now because Zelensky comes out and says that they've run out of missiles for certain air defenses. The situation is very bad. The Europeans just claim to be war hawks on paper and keep pushing Ukraine to the front lines. They're not giving Zelensky anything now either. He visited you in Canada and your prime minister gave Zelensky a $2 billion check for some reason. From what I see, I think Canada has plenty of its own problems, and you could have taken one serious problem and solved it with those $2 billion. He writes Zelensky a $2 billion check. I don't pay Canadian taxes, but it still amazes me.
2.5 to be precise.
I'll also add that the main problem in Canada is actually the person who writes a check for $2.5 billion to Ukraine or to another country. But that's our main internal problem today. Why are any calls for negotiations within Ukraine immediately branded as working for the Kremlin?
Yes, we discuss this from show to show. That's how propaganda works. Everything is built in the most primitive way. You can't express a constructive or alternative point of view today without being marginalized.
Well, I understand, but look, here's the question. Wasn't it Russia that started the war? Why is criticism increasingly focused only on Kyiv?
Is this a question from the audience or viewers?
Yes, this is a question from the audience.
I'll say this about myself because I'm a citizen of Ukraine and Zelensky is the president of my country. I have some influence on him and the situation thanks to the media. Ukrainian citizens unfortunately only have this kind of influence today. I'm not a citizen of Russia. Putin has long been defined as an enemy for me, and I don't expect any gestures of goodwill or any noble gestures from an enemy. It's clear this person will always oppose Ukraine, and constantly criticizing or insulting Putin won't weaken him. I'm not a propagandist. I can influence Zelensky and the situation, but not Putin or his decisions.
And Dennis, if Ukraine agrees to territorial concessions now, what would prevent a new war in 3 to 5 years?
Security guarantees would prevent it, at the very least, and nothing else. I've said this on your show as well, and I say it on every show. People shouldn't believe in any guarantees. They don't exist. If someone wants to break them, they will, and history has shown that. Ukraine's success is the only guarantee, and I'll keep saying it.
All right, so tell me, please, does Zelensky have any alternative at all besides negotiations from a position of weakness, or is there something else?
Dennis and I were just talking before you joined. They plan to keep Trump waiting until the United States midterm elections about 9 or 10 months away. And then, according to his plan, the Democrats are supposed to win. They will start giving weapons and money again and funding this as well.
A question from the listeners. Isn't the pressure on Volodymyr Zelensky from the United States an attempt to sweep the problem under the rug rather than solve it?
No, these people just refused to understand the situation and believed what the media said. Yesterday, Zelensky gave an interview to Fox News, acting like his old friendly self, smiling, laughing, and seeming relatable. But in reality, he's mean and unpleasant. Still, people keep believing his act and don't see the truth. Ukraine cannot win militarily or defeat Putin regardless of our wishes, and the war continues. Time is working against Ukraine, its demographics, the country itself, and faith in its people.
Ask Dennis, if Zelensky leaves, who exactly will be able to negotiate better and on more favorable terms? Name the person.
I don't know who Ukraine's new president will be.
Aren't we repeating the scenario where peace at any cost later leads to even greater casualties?
All right, we're repeating ourselves. Let the person suggest another option. If he knows how to defeat Russia, let him explain.
Ask Dennis, is he personally for freezing the war now or for continuing until better conditions?
No, I'm not for continuing, not for freezing. I'm for a radical solution to the problems, even if it means rewriting, redrawing the political map of Ukraine. Dennis and I already talked about this. Stop saying we'll get something back. Things happened as they did. That's it. We must focus on rebuilding a successful Ukraine with what's left, since politicians lost everything else.
Tell me, Dennis, what kind of compromise do you consider acceptable? And what do you consider betrayal? Where is your personal boundary?
I can't answer that. I'm not an official. What's the point? I won't take responsibility for negativity caused by Zelensky and Poroshenko. I haven't lost or betrayed any part of Ukraine. They and their people did. So I won't accept the blame or make concessions. I've accepted that Crimea and Donbas are lost to Ukraine and won't return. I came to terms with this long ago, knowing who controls Ukraine. Back then and now.
These are two more questions that kind of criticize you, but you told me last time that I can ask such questions. Dennis, you criticize Zelensky, but who do you think is a more suitable leader in the current situation? You've already said that you've answered this question. If you want, I can skip it and move on to the next one, Dennis, okay?
No, well, all right, let's do it.
Or you go ahead if you want.
No, that's a defeatist attitude. Zelensky failed in foreign policy and ignored domestic issues. Are we saying that out of 35 or 40 million Ukrainians worldwide, he's uniquely smart? Or do people not notice what's happened in the country over the past 4 years? Either don't show the territorial recruitment center video or show the video of a police officer hitting a child at a crosswalk and posting a $5,000 bail in Preluki. I can't understand or show a deputy from Zelensky's party who is completely mired in corruption along with all his friends.
Dennis, do you think there's a risk that criticizing the authorities during the war plays into Moscow's hands, or is that argument manipulative?
That's a loser mentality. That's it. Let's imagine we don't criticize. Then no one would have found out about Mindik, about the deputies. What kind of country would that be? Why do leftists in Israel hold massive rallies against Netanyahu, display insulting banners, and yet neither the special services, Netanyahu, nor the police respond? And in the end, the country still manages, thinks ahead, prospers, and everything else. Democracy is something you either have or not. People discuss who would negotiate better, but is Zelensky even negotiating? That's my question. Trump is negotiating, and Zelensky wouldn't be if not for him. If Biden or Kamala were in office, would Zelensky have negotiated at all in 4 years? So what did his negotiations achieve? I don't get it.
Well, yes, but if, Dennis, let's suppose that, God forbid, in a year Ukraine finds itself in even worse conditions, who should take political responsibility for that? Zelensky, the United States, or everyone at once?
No, the one who leads Ukraine is the one who makes the decisions, not the United States, not Boris Johnson, who pushed to continue the war after Istanbul, nor Biden or the Democrats. That's all indirect.
Thank you, Dennis. I want to remind our listeners once again that we are joined by public and political figure entrepreneur Denis Yelisevich. 778-716-67. That's our live studio phone number. I see that right now more than 2,100 people are watching us at the moment, which is nice. So friends, keep going, join us. Don't forget to like and share this video. Dennis, I wanted to continue in chronological order, starting with how we began these negotiations at Mar-a-Lago. And here are literally today's news about the alleged bombing, or rather the attempted attack on Vladimir Putin's residence in Valdai. Peskov, his spokesperson, has already stated that this is terrorism, a terrorist act, and moreover directed against Trump, Peskov said. Well, and the Minister of Foreign Affairs, Lavrov, spoke in roughly the same rhetoric, but there was also mention of Russia's response. This is what we talked about, I think, in the previous broadcast, also discussing the topic of why actually we don't see it. There are no strikes against the commanders-in-chief of Russia and Ukraine. Yes, there is some kind of agreement. Apparently that's how it was, though I'm not sure how much. This really outraged at least Russia, and by the way, it also outraged Trump. He said that he made a statement together with Netanyahu. They were standing there, and he said that it made him very angry. How would you comment on this situation, Dennis? First of all, do you believe that such an attack actually took place? And why do you think Peskov said that it was directed against Trump?
Peskov. let's start from the end. Peskov said that because right now it's beneficial for them to turn Trump against Zelensky, of course, and they will use any opportunity. But again, this is one of those situations where you really need to look at the root cause. So you're asking whether I believe it or not? I believe it more than I don't. I'll only trust information from the United States and won't believe Russian or Ukrainian propaganda. Both sides lie all the time. It's pathological. That's why I'll wait for more conclusions. Many sources confirm it's true. For now, I'm not making any decisions for myself. I'm just waiting for more information. Why did they do that? Did you see Medvedev's post yesterday? It was nearly swearing and full of threats.
Well, that's just his usual rhetoric.
Yeah, we will kill.
Still, he's not just anyone. Medvedev, right?
No, well, of course. When Naftali Bennett was Israel's prime minister and the war began, he mediated and it was agreed Zelensky wouldn't be killed. And then Zelensky came out of the bunker and they agreed. You don't shoot from here, and at certain points you don't kill these people and you don't kill those people. Yesterday it was announced that these agreements were annulled. There are different points of view. Some believe that Zelensky provoked this on purpose, supposedly so that now anyone who speaks out against Zelensky can be accused of supporting Putin. He is trying to kill me, he is hunting me. That's one point of view. There's another point of view, and I'll tell you my own. But why did Zelensky, while congratulating Ukrainians on Christmas, tell Putin to drop dead? The State Security Committee caught that carefully and thought, oh, so you want me to drop dead? And imagine if they took it and initiated it themselves, staged this whole thing. Could that happen? Well, as one of the possibilities, it could.
Quite possible, of course.
But Dennis, elaborate. In that case, you mean this statement by Zelensky, but first, this statement, from your point of view, what was it for? So why did Zelensky say that?
To disrupt peace talks. You and I know very well how Israel has conducted peace negotiations many times in its history, other peace negotiations. Well, just remember peace negotiations. You can read about the Union of Soviet Socialist Republics in Finland. Imagine a key negotiation point and suddenly someone steps out and publicly insults another person. Well, that's impossible in world history. Why would anyone do that? Is this person interested in peace? Of course not. How does the Committee for State Security operate? If you look at any similar statements by Zelensky, they always take some action in response, meaning they don't miss anything. And he knows this perfectly well, and he comes out and says it. It seems to me I'm not telling Putin to come out. Let's wish health to Putin, who's bombing us. Just don't say anything at all if you're interested in peace.
Well, then this means the following. After such a statement, what Zelensky said, Russia will kind of have the right to say, stop the negotiations, Kyiv is to blame. Is that how it turns out?
That's almost exactly what they just said.
They already said that, yes.
They negotiated and said it, not us. We're still in the negotiation process.
They're changing the terms.
Yes, but our terms will now be much tougher. We can believe that this is staged, that Zelensky did this. Zelensky could have done this because he's in a hopeless situation. He's already at Mar-a-Lago. And that's it, old man. Are we making a deal or not?
I just wanted to clarify one thing, Dennis, that this statement actually came not after Zelensky said he should die, but after today's supposed attack. I say supposed because it's not officially known yet.
No, but I mean, this attack might be connected to those words.
Of course.
If he usually wishes to die, then...
Yes, of course.
As Dennis Mazar says, while you're on this page, I'll read you a few questions, as you say, from the audience. If the attack on the residents, in quotes, doesn't affect the dialogue with the United States, then why does Peskov even mention it at all? Who is this a signal for?
No, they do have an impact and affect things in some way, as we noted with quotes from Ushakov and Peskov. That's it. We're becoming much tougher. And Putin's first words were that if Zelensky doesn't want to sign, we'll go now and take power by force.
Well, now all the propaganda channels are howling and moaning about a nuclear strike, saying, why don't we launch one? Why not? So, for example, a strike, I'm talking about Oreshnik's strike on Kyiv. That's the least of what Russian propagandists are talking about right now. I mean, people like Solovyov and others.
You know, I find this unpleasant, and under these Solovyovs and others, Russian society is thrilled. How about we use nukes on Ukraine?
Yeah, let's do it.
But why? Just a question. What for and why?
Dennis, can we consider such statements from the Kremlin not as negotiations, but as pressure and intimidation towards Ukraine and the West?
No, look, I'm already tired of explaining this to people on my streams. It won't go smoothly in this situation. Putin won't come out and say, oh, guys, it's all peace, I love you, and everything goes smoothly, like we're moving forward point by point and people are enjoying it. It's going to be nerve-wracking, twisting arms in every situation. He'll keep doing it for as long as he can keep twisting like that. That's the style of the Committee for State Security and the Kremlin.
But isn't Ukraine itself helping the Kremlin when it gives them a reason to talk about terrorist attacks and to toughen their stance even more?
That's what I mean. Zelensky is aiding the Kremlin and fueling the war. He has no interest in peace. You see, he's not so much of a fool anymore to come out and make such a mistake. And I want to tell you, it's very easy to come out and say, drop dead, than to go to Concha Zaspa, which hasn't been shelled so far, and put all the people under fire before the holidays or even without the holidays. That's very easy. Your family isn't under fire. Your children aren't at war. Your friends aren't at war. They're stealing hundreds of millions of dollars in this war. That's just not fair. If you have a personal issue with Putin, resign and as a private citizen say or do whatever you want, but don't endanger the country or people.
And what do you think, by the way, someone is writing to us in the chat? Zelensky said he's very tired and will transfer leadership to Murayev on January 1. First of all, for some reason, it caught my eye. For some reason, I started seeing it very often. Well, when there are ads on social networks, those short videos, there started to be a lot of Murayev for some reason, his rhetoric. I mean, him.
A lot of bots.
Yeah. By the way, I heard that there were, let's say, rumors, talks that on December 31st, Zelensky, just like Boris Nikolaevich Yeltsin, the Russian president, once did, would say, I'm tired, I'm leaving. Well, of course, there's no Murayev there, of course. I just kind of combined these two last names. Dennis, the question is, do you believe that something like this is theoretically possible? I mean, that Zelensky will say, that's it, I'm leaving, because it feels like today Zelensky is getting in everyone's way.
No, he would never say that. He clings to power with his teeth like a pit bull terrier, and he's not going to give up even a millimeter or let go of that power at all. I'm telling you this with full responsibility.
And as for interfering, like I said, even Trump is constantly affected by this. Today, he's really bothered by these statements, extremely outraged, as he said. And do you know who told me today about the attacks on Putin's residence? Vladimir Putin told me about this on the phone today. Yes, so what Putin told him, he believed it accordingly. You'd think so, yes. Maybe he has more information. We don't know much. Intelligence reports might say something, but we don't know. Still, that's how it seems from the outside. So do you think it would be easier? I'll say it again. By no means do I necessarily want this. But what's happening today with Zelensky and from the side of the National Anti-Corruption Bureau of Ukraine, and also these new things, since we've already mentioned him today. Oh, so about the new revelations, yes. In the end, very soon it will reach Zelensky and he will simply be removed. Because I'll say it again, from the way things are going, it feels like he's just about to become unnecessary. Like if we remove him now, that's it. We'll solve everything, make peace and settle the territory. Forget him. We'll give everything away now and end this.
The Federal Bureau of Investigation is currently working on surrounding Zelensky, and Trump has all the resources to remove Zelensky and sideline him within a week. But Trump isn't doing it for two reasons. The first reason is that it could further destabilize the situation inside Ukraine, and Putin would take advantage of that. The second is that Trump has the midterm elections ahead, and he still needs to play this political game. He doesn't want to upset Democrats or give them ammunition like saying Trump nearly gave up Ukraine and destabilized it. Because of this, the decision was made this year to gradually strip Zelensky of power, and they are successfully continuing to do so. And there's not much left, just gradually. And I'm telling you, in 26 there will be elections.
Dennis, listen, when people run out of arguments, they start insulting or saying nasty things. And you once told me that if you have any questions, the kind that people write but are clearly off topic or irrelevant, but still you said it on our broadcast, I don't remember that. But the author writes, do you have an Israeli passport, yes or no?
Yes, I won't answer personal questions. Anything about family, passports, documents, I won't tell anyone anything. I have a Ukrainian passport.
Well, as a citizen of Israel, you shouldn't just sit around in the United States. You should defend the country of Israel. I don't understand the context of this question or how to respond.
Look, someone made up that I have someone else's passport, went on air and decided to say it. Let them speculate.
Please tell me. This is the third time you've asked me this. You insist I'm afraid to ask Denis Yelisevich, but I did, and Denis answered. I hope you're satisfied. Denis, is there a risk that such strikes, if we're talking about the residents we just mentioned, work more for Russian propaganda than for real pressure on Russia? Or is it not possible to say that?
In any case, it works for Russian propaganda. Any kind of escalation will, you see, right now, everything will work for Russian propaganda. No matter what, Russian propaganda uses all of this. Moreover, Russian propaganda doesn't even have to do anything right now. Enough is already happening in Ukraine. They don't need to make any extra effort. Let me put it this way. Yesterday evening in my time zone, and then this morning, there were 3 news stories. Yesterday, Dnipro Mayor Filatov, formerly Dnipropetrovsk, spoke to either the military or the territorial recruitment center and said the following. There are problems with garbage in the city. Residents are complaining that the garbage problem in the city isn't being dealt with. The draft dodgers are to blame. These men stay at home, order food by courier, and then throw away all that packaging, he says.
Wait, what are Okhilanti?
Well, those who supposedly dodge military service, they're called Ukhilanti in Ukraine.
Well, I know men who haven't left their homes for 2 years.
Because that's who he means.
That's them, yes.
So basically a fascist. So Mayor Filatov is apparently a fascist since he does things like that. He blamed all the men who aren't serving for everything. It's not him who's failing at his job and so on and so forth. The next news, Prime Minister Sviridenko is initiating a ban on Russian language versions of websites in Ukraine. Why? And third, the Ministry of Culture of Ukraine asked the National Music Academy to remove Tchaikovsky from its name.
They removed Tchaikovsky's name from the title? In what context?
It turns out he's a Putin-associated figure.
Tchaikovsky?
Yes.
This isn't a joke or a prank. I'm serious.
I'm telling you this seriously. And why would Russian propaganda need to make something up when there are idiots running the country here?
I have no comments on Tchaikovsky. Really, Denis, a question for you. Ask Denis, where is the line between a strong move and an action? Moscow then says, that's it, we won't negotiate anymore.
That won't happen. There won't be any such moves. Moscow will look at the situation and respond directly to it. They know exactly who they're dealing with, are aware of the weak spots, and are unfortunately using that successfully.
Tell me, Denis, will history remember Volodymyr Zelensky as Churchill or as a politician who couldn't stop in time?
Well, you know, they're already publishing history books in Ukraine. I've seen them myself, where Zelensky isn't just Churchill, he's Churchill times 10. Ukraine wouldn't exist without him, and we're all alive today because of Zelensky. So it will be the way of whoever writes the books. If Zelensky writes the history books and stays in power, then he'll be a mega Churchill. But if the other side wins, the side that's inclined toward common sense and not, for example, Poroshenko, then it will be different. The truth will be written.
Zelensky stated that he will leave power after the conflict is over.
There was no such statement.
What does he actually mean by the end? A peace agreement, a ceasefire, or just a pause in the war?
I'm not sure. You should ask him, but I watched the Fox News interview where the quote is from, and that's not what was said. He said, "I'll rest after the war." And the host asked him, "What will you do when the war is over?" He didn't say, "I'll leave after the war is over." He said, "I'll rest, I want to rest." That doesn't mean I'm giving up power, I'm leaving. It means I'll rest, then keep tormenting Ukraine.
But here, what I'm reading now, when Zelensky says, I'll rest, yes, or when someone interprets it as, I'll leave after the war, doesn't this mean that the length of his time in power is directly tied to how long this conflict, this war will last?
No, well, as I said, of course, the war equals Zelensky's power. Definitely. But he doesn't believe that. I'm telling you right now. In his mind, he really believes, I'll run in the elections, I'll win them.
Uh-huh. Well, yes, Denis.
Thank you, Denis. I would like a little bit. Again, we've already touched on this topic today. It's the exposure of the National Anti-Corruption Bureau of Ukraine. And as I already mentioned, I watched the interview with Mr. Mindic, journalist Takac. Well, let's say probably the interview itself, by and large, isn't really worth much. Yes, because one person spent an hour asking questions while the other spent an hour dodging them. But I actually like that. It was just great, real professionals. Both the journalist and Mr. Mindic, who claims he's never given an interview, in my view. It feels like he does this every day, and he's so skillful at dodging questions that it's just impressive. There are no other words for it. I was really watching and honestly amazed at how skillfully and professionally Mr. Mindic dodged all these questions and so on. I wanted to ask about something a little different. Just a few days ago, we spoke on our broadcast with journalist Alexei Venediktov, who once headed Echo of Moscow, the former chief editor of Echo of Moscow, the largest Russian socio-political radio station. And we asked him about this meeting. This information had just appeared that supposedly they accidentally met Mr. Mindic on the beach, to which Alexei Venediktov said that nothing happens by accident and that they could not have met by chance. So he assumes that most likely there was actually an agreement. So what do you think? Is all that we've seen actually real? He searched for him throughout Israel for 2.5 days but couldn't find him. It's all kind of staged, but in reality, they just needed to show something somewhere like, well, yeah, it seems like he's not really hiding anywhere. Mr. Mindic seems to be answering our questions, and it's not just Mindic. There are actually 2 more people there, though I don't know them at all. But I think Ukrainians know them. I think it's Zuckerberg, right? Zuckerman's brother. Yes, the one who also seems to be involved in these matters. What are your thoughts on this story?
What I'll say will interest your audience since mine already knows it well.
Yes, of course.
Israel is about as big as the Kiev region, so you don't need to track people there, especially corrupt officials. You'll spot them easily, and it's a safe country. You don't really need to worry there, despite that outrageous incident shown with the security guard who almost beat up a Russian speaker. But that can't happen in Israel. Everyone behaves decently. And they leak to him who lives where, who hangs out where, and who will be where and when. Tkach knew this well, but let me add something else. If you go to the original video by Ukrainska Pravda and look at the comments, you'll see an enthusiastic comment there. Enthusiasm from Mikhail Tkach. Misha, thank you for saving Ukraine and supporting law enforcement. You're amazing. We couldn't do this without you. He's investigated for 15 years. Ominous music plays in the background and a massive 1-meter camera lens is present. He's closely tracking someone, but things are worsening and corruption keeps rising. Take the case with Mindic and the Zuckermans. This is electricity, Energoatom. It's managed by the government. People are happy now, but tomorrow, instead of Mindic, Petrenko will steal in the same way because the government controls electricity. But if it's a private company, this won't happen. People don't get that if it wasn't Mindic, someone else would be involved. It's not about Mindic and the Zuckermans. It's about it just lying there. And if I'm the president's friend, I can just take it. You know, there's a really funny story. I showed it on my stream yesterday. This Tkach says, I tried to find out at the border from the border guards using my serious connections. How did you leave? As soon as they hear your last name, they refuse to talk at all. You have that much influence. He says, what influence do I have besides being the president's friend? That's quite a statement.
He called him the friend of all friends. Yeah, he said all his friends were like that. He says, I don't really have any friends. I literally have like 2 people. Yeah, that's my friend. We've known each other for 20 years. A really good friend, the best of all. Well, it's a comedy film.
This is the 95th Quarter that was a show by the 95th Quarter. They keep performing it. The Club of the Funny and Inventive.
You know, it's when you just said that, and maybe it's not the Mindici, it's the Zuckermans, right? But Dennis, who did you mean? It's the Rotenbergs, not the Zuckerbergs. Well, everything got turned upside down.
No, the reason I'm saying this is because really sometimes we talk about everyday anti-Semitism. Yes, basically, yes, well, what can you say? Ukrainians, they open it up. They look, yeah, who ran away? Mindich, Zuckermans. And there were a few other Jewish surnames mentioned too, right? And many people might really get the impression that, yeah, it's the Jewish mafia. That's what they're like.
No, you can refer to Mikhail Tkach and his investigation from before the war and Poroshenko's presidency. Names like Kanonenko, Svinarchuk, and Gladkovsky, distinctly Ukrainian, were doing the same thing.
People aren't interested in that anymore. Trust me, Zuckermans and Mindishes are what they'll target.
That's what I wanted to say, Dennis. Petrenko, you mentioned Petrenko just as an example, like Mindiches. And what Dennis Zuckerman says is much more impressive than what Petrenko or Ivanenko says.
And really, it's so convenient. This is our problem.
Of course, that's who's to blame, of course. Excuse me, we have a phone call. Let's take a short break. Good morning, you're live. What's your name?
Hello, everyone. Good morning. Dennis, I have a question for you. Tell me, what if we hold elections now and have separate elections for Ukrainians who are currently in Ukraine and for Ukrainians who are abroad? Well, the diaspora, so to speak. What do you think? Will the result be about the same, or will it be different, or will it be the same if we hold a referendum? So whether Russia should make an agreement or not, do you think the result will be the same or different?
Thank you. That's a good question, by the way.
In both cases, Zelensky loses. But in the case of those who will vote outside Ukraine, physically he will get 5% there. And in Ukraine, maybe he'll get 10. Among those who will vote, that's the only difference. As for the referendum, I think the result will be about the same.
So basically, today Zelensky is not supported in Ukraine.
Of course not. Of course not. You see, right now they publish ratings here. For example, Zaluzhny is in first place, Zelensky and Budanov share second and third. That's today's agenda. But if television channels air something different tomorrow, people are already being preconditioned. Here are the last names. Please load them into your brain. No one else is possible. And many people gladly, let's say, swallow it. I urge you not to do this. They're brainwashing you about the names and outcome.
And tell me, Dennis, going back to Crimea, I missed this question. Why are people in Crimea upset today? I don't know why, who said that they are upset or not upset. Half of the Ukrainian population was driven out of there in 2014, and it was settled with Russians who now live there in other people's homes. Well, about living in other people's homes, that's a rather debatable issue, you know, because back when the Crimean Tatars were deported in 1944, and Ukrainians and Russians were brought in, they were also settled in other people's homes, the ones they lived in. Those people lived in Central Asia, and the situation was dire. And in the late 80s and early 90s, these people started returning to Crimea. And by the way, the Crimean Tatars never attacked those homes. Those homes were built by their grandfathers and grandmothers. This is the southern coast of Crimea. This is Gurzuf. This is Livadia, Semis, Miskor, and what else? Half of Simferopol, the capital of Crimea, is still built up with Tatar buildings today. Did anyone take responsibility for this? Was there any accountability? In this case, when people don't know history or they just say things, they're presenting wishful thinking as reality.
I call them something else, Alexandra. They live in an ideal world. People come to my stream with similar questions on a different topic. Dennis, where are the guarantees that Trump's security guarantees will work? Dennis, what guarantees are there that the elections will be fair? There aren't any. Just like there's no guarantee a brick won't fall on your head tomorrow. People who aren't responsible act like the world is perfect. Some move into certain houses, others elsewhere, but the world is cruel and injustice is everywhere, especially in things like this. And you have to accept it and think about how to live with it, how to deal with it, and what to do next. They just keep telling themselves it's perfect. These same people go to the polls on election day and always pick the biggest idiot among the candidates. But in words, everything is meant to be perfect and guaranteed for them.
All right, Dennis, if everything is perfect and guaranteed, why do they elect the biggest idiot?
That's because they need to shift responsibility onto someone else. They don't want to think about why or what. And reforms mean they'll have to work. So why would I choose someone who's actually a good guy?
Dennis, do you actually understand that those who shout that Russia attacked and is fighting against Ukraine are blatantly lying? Russia is not fighting against Ukraine and Ukrainians, but rather for Ukraine, for our Russian, reasonable Ukraine. So what does Dennis think about this?
Yeah, no, these are crazy people. They annoy me. They live in their own world, apparently. For them, Ukraine attacked Russia. It's a pointless conversation. It's a hopeless case.
What about security guarantees? Ask Dennis. Security guarantees. Maybe from the author's point of view, only Russia can provide them for Ukraine. Or are there any other options? You yourself say that Ukraine is unlikely to be able to defeat Russia today.
The only guarantee. Believing in Russian guarantees now would be ridiculous. Lavrov said weeks before the war, we are not going to attack Ukraine. So what are we even discussing? Ukraine's only security guarantee is its success, with a focus on the future, life, and reclaiming Crimea and Donbass. What language are you speaking? Removing Tchaikovsky will just start another war.
And why is there such dislike for Trump among the Ukrainian population? You said that they curse him with the worst words there. What has Trump done to upset Ukrainians today?
You know, I would like to give you a full answer to this question, but I can't. People lack a sense of cause and effect. They are told that you don't like Trump, but he's the only one who is for peace, who can actually make it happen, and who has been seriously working on this for a long time, even though America has a lot of its own problems. There's no answer. That's why I would like to talk with Michael Naki. He also told Dud that Biden has done more for peace than Trump, and that Biden was close to achieving peace. For me, that's news, for example. I would like to hear more arguments as to why.
Could you please repeat how Michael Naki phrased what you just said?
Dud asked him the question, tell me, under whom was peace closer? Ukraine. Under whom was it closer to peace? Under Biden, with Biden, or with Trump? He says definitely under Biden. Dude asks why. Because Biden gave weapons and money. But this topic was not continued further. I would just like to ask.
You know, I wrote to Michael and I'm waiting for his reply. If that happened, I would be very happy because I don't have any guarantee. Dennis, but there's a suggestion that maybe it could happen.
Well, the speakers who work on that side have brainwashed Ukraine from top to bottom over these years. Agent Krasnov, do you remember that circus?
I do.
Well, we laugh about it. About 30-40% in Ukraine believed it, and Trump had Rasmussen or Gallup do surveys there.
You should remind us about that story with Krasnov because not everyone remembers it, Dennis.
They claimed Trump worked for the State Security Committee with Krasnov as his top agent, and people believed it.
And now millions, yes, these are people in Ukraine.
This is still going on.
Well, I'll say this. At the very least, most people probably believe that Trump sympathizes with Putin, not Zelensky. And honestly, I agree with that. I'll just say it as it is because, well, I don't see any other explanation, for example, so it could have been different.
How do you know what it's really like?
Well, by Donald Trump's expressions, because today I understand that Trump also, of course, realizes that right now the main thing is Russia, and Russia has all the advantages. And it's absolutely necessary to have a phone call with Donald Trump before negotiations with Zelensky, to talk for an hour and a half, to talk afterwards, to believe Vladimir Putin, who called and said that Zelensky struck Vladimir Putin's residence, and so on and so on. Yes, Trump says all this openly. Yes, the rhetoric matches. That's why naturally people in Ukraine, yes, who are going through this every day, sitting in Kyiv, so to speak, experiencing this bombardment. Well, naturally, they see all this. It's all unpleasant for them. Well, at the very least, that's my point of view.
Yesterday on my stream, I showed an interview from one channel funded by the government with the head of our intelligence, Budanov. Budanov usually talked nonsense, but this time he surprised me. The journalists echoed your points, Dennis, but Budanov said, wait, you don't know. Russia's main goal is China, which is the United States' main enemy. So Trump and the United States aim to distance Russia from China.
Yes, but we don't see that happening yet. And today, by the way, there was a statement, I think, from the same Lavrov who commented on it. So, hypothetically speaking, if there is an attack on Taiwan, then accordingly, Russia will be on China's side. Accordingly, a completely opposite interest. Because the United States, naturally, as always expected, will defend the interests of Taiwan specifically in this conflict between Russia and China.
Yes, in other words, there couldn't have been any other answer.
Well, I agree, yes. The question couldn't have been any different.
Trump must separate Russia from China as the process continues. Personally, he respects Putin more. Because you remember, or maybe you don't, viewers, actually Zelensky organized Trump's impeachment during his first term. The Biden case, Hunter Biden. Trump called, and Zelensky had all the evidence to show that it was a fabrication on Biden's part. Then Trump wouldn't have lost the last election, but Zelensky didn't do it, and Trump remembers very well who he's dealing with.
Yes, by the way, Trump is very vindictive in this regard. I agree with that too. And he remembers all of this very well. And at the right moment, he always brings it up, or even at the wrong moment, he always brings it up.
Yes.
Dennis, we've already covered your point. There, Lavrov once said that Russia would never attack Ukraine. By the way, of course, Putin also said the same thing, that it's all ridiculous, it's all nonsense, ha ha ha, he he he. And when he was asked why there was such a buildup of troops on the border with Ukraine, the answers were always the same. It's just exercises and so on and so on. And today the same thing is happening in relation to Europe. Like, yeah, that's nonsense. How could anyone even imagine such a thing? Well, literally today, Vladimir Putin is signing a decree on holding special training for reservists. Yes. So once again, and plus, starting from 2026, from next year, there will already be an indefinite enlistment in the army in Russia. Yes, so there won't be any spring or autumn drafts, but throughout the year. And plus, there will be these constant special training sessions for reservists. What do you think this is connected to? So, and in your opinion, does this look similar to the situation we recalled earlier today? I mean, the statement that Russia would never attack Ukraine.
No, this is different. Russia stands no chance against NATO, and Putin knows this well. And the Europeans are scaring people, European leaders are scaring Europeans to cover up their own failures and to keep Europeans hooked on fear. Don't expect too much from life. We've experienced this in Ukraine.
And now, Dennis, I'd like to move a bit into conspiracy theory. I've heard that supposedly in that very Anchorage there was an agreement between Vladimir Putin and Donald Trump that this is how they would divide their spheres of influence. Because both Trump, disappointed in Europe, and Putin, disappointed in Europe, thought, why not go down this path? The United States focuses exclusively on Latin America and doesn't interfere in Europe, and Putin doesn't go there but deals with Europe. And when, so to speak, an attack on this very Europe happens, Trump won't lift a finger to save or stand up for someone and so on. And here's the question: can Europe or a European country handle Russia without the involvement of the United States?
I can't imagine a ground operation against Europe from Putin. Putin hasn't taken any major Ukrainian cities in 4 years. We're talking about Europe now. We're talking about all of Europe's problems and the abnormal leaders they have right now, but they still have their own wealth. Don't forget that Turkey is a NATO member. That's important to remember, and Turkey has a very powerful army and powerful weapons. I don't think America will just watch. Europe has cooperated for 80 years, recently with America and the free world. Again, these are just scare tactics.
Europe is facing a crazy demographic crisis because of migrants.
An economic one, and now they're blaming Trump, and Putin is supposedly preparing for war. People, don't get distracted by this. They're pretending to prepare for war.
Does Denis Yelisevich understand that Russia was the last country in the world that wanted to go to war with Ukraine?
No, I don't understand.
Russia was forced to. It absolutely did not want to, but it was forced to start the special military operation. We often hear such statements, Denis.
Yes, I'm used to it. I heard that a lot when I started my YouTube channel. Russians quickly swarmed in, so I learned to ignore it. These are people who live in their own matrix, and you'll never get them out of it. For them, Russia is always right about everything, so there's no point.
When Denis, tell me, when Putin reported a possible attack on the Valdai residence using Ukrainian drones, President Zelensky denied this attack, and President Trump said, I don't know. Don't you think that information warfare is just as much a part of the overall war as military actions? But the negative consequences continue and verdicts become more difficult. Did you expect these consequences from this venture?
Information has always been crucial in warfare, and now in the digital age, it's a dominant element. Of course, it is present, but specifically in this sense, it wasn't an information war. It was just another exchange of statements related to the fact that peace negotiations are very close to success.
Well, Dennis, now they're asking about the beginning of the war. Who predicted it and who didn't? I just saw an interview on Alexei Alexeyevich Venediktov's page. I think it was Dmitry Bykov. I never agreed with those who said there would never be a war, and I never dismissed that possibility. More than possible, not because Putin was going to start it, but because too many people wanted to take advantage of it. What does that mean?
I don't know. I know that Dmitry Bykov is an incredibly educated person who turned into a real scoundrel who apparently went to America to work for leftist money for those grants. Off camera, apparently, according to some information, he says that he has a small child and needs to provide for him, and that's his agenda. So let everything he says, all this nonsense supporting propaganda and militarism, remain on his conscience. For me, this person no longer exists after he took this position. So people in Ukraine can die under a dictatorship, and I'll just say that one dictator is good and the other is bad.
Thank you, Dennis.
Thank you, Dennis. Basically, this question has already been asked, but I'll ask it again since we mentioned Yevgeny Murayev today. What do you think? Could the Russian leadership, for example, bet on him to promote him for the position of president of Ukraine? Again, we've repeatedly said that there can't be a Kremlin-backed candidate as president in Ukraine, but still, what do you think? Or maybe there is a chance, because you would probably agree as well that during the elections, Russia will naturally exert pressure, all kinds of pressure to remove Zelensky. Naturally, by any means possible, that's no secret to anyone. What do you think? Is Yevgeny Murayev suitable for this? I mean, as president?
He might fit Russia, but he'll never be elected in Ukraine. Yevgeny Murayev has always been known for his pro-Russian, purely anti-Western rhetoric. Moreover, when the war started, for example, I'm not a public person at all. I always avoid any attention, but I went on air. But Yevgeny Murayev, always seen on camera, vanished for 3 years. How are people who were under shelling during this time supposed to listen to someone who didn't express his position at all for 3 years? Even knowing how foolish some of our people are, I still can't imagine that.
Go ahead, Dennis, then I'll go.
Yeah, no, I just wanted to say that the year is almost over. Yeah, we literally have just 1 day left. Many people were still hoping that all this would end by the end of the year, and Trump said that it would happen at Christmas. To be fair, that was a long time ago. So it's clear how things are right now. How do you see things developing further? It's clear this war will continue into next year. And honestly, it just feels joyless, kind of hopeless, at least because of all these conversations. Once again, the United States made an agreement with Ukraine, but for some reason, no one asks Russia's opinion, even though everyone understands that Russia is the main player in this situation. Of course, it's clear that Ukraine also plays a big role, and a lot depends on it.
You claim everyone knows Russia is the main player. Who exactly is everyone?
Well, how can you reach an agreement? For example, can the United States reach an agreement with Ukraine to sign a peace deal without any territory involved? They're negotiating now, but no one is discussing territories.
I get it, but if everyone truly understood, would the war still continue?
All right, some people don't understand, or maybe they do understand, that entering these negotiations without Russia, without Russia's opinion, it's just pouring from empty into void. Won't this continue next year? Let me put it that way.
As I said, I disagree because I see Zelensky sabotaging peace. If Zelensky genuinely wanted peace, we could be here with you now. I would gladly discuss only Russia's side, but when I see that my country's president is not in favor of peace, what's the point of discussing Putin? If Putin agrees but my president doesn't, there will be no peace. Major decisions, including this, are being made in Kiev now. That's the issue with prospects. I disagree as well. I'm optimistic about the future, though progress is slow. Yes, people are now dependent on the news feed. They read it, there's a lull, then there's some good news, bad news, and their mood swings in different directions. Well, it's a difficult situation. It's a marathon, but it's close to a resolution. I'm convinced of that. For some reason, Ukraine just has no one left to fight. The only options now are mobilizing 18-year-olds and women, or I don't know what else. There's simply no one left.
Dennis, when you said that these are draft dodgers, men who don't want to go to the front, I'm serious. I have a female acquaintance. Her husband has hardly left the house for 2 years now because he's of conscription age and he doesn't want to go. That's understandable. Are there many such people in Ukraine now?
A lot. There are millions of men who aren't living their lives, often whose wives have gone abroad and already have other relationships there, including with their children. That's a lot of broken marriages. The statistics show a depressing picture. It's a major social problem. These men, you see, do you know what's so absurd about this situation? Right now, we have one person who's also connected with Soros. His last name is Fursa. He came out and said, we need to hire mercenaries from Latin America, Venezuela, Colombia. For them, life in Ukraine will feel like a fairy tale. They'll have children, and decades later, their kids will fight for Ukraine. He was completely serious. On air on Poroshenko's channel, which he owns. That's the kind of rhetoric, and he showed all of this on his streams.
Yes, I know.
Sorry, and for bringing in illegal migrants from Nepal and Bangladesh. These scoundrels want to destroy Ukraine, and they see it as normal for a Ukrainian man to end up in a coffin or leave the country. Colombia, Venezuela, Nepal, and Bangladesh will be in Central Europe, in a wonderful country. If not for the idiotic ruler, can you imagine how terrible that is?
No, really, it's truly terrible. It's basically the destruction of the country altogether. Well, we were just talking recently about New Khazaria, that they want to seize Ukraine.
As you can see, Latin America and Central Asia. I was just getting to the point about that Ukrainian guy who's hiding now. Yeah, he doesn't want to go to the front. That's completely normal and understandable. He could generate gross domestic product, he could work, spend that money, live his life, and help his country. From this perspective, in the way he could do it, this is not happening.
Dennis, what do you think? Will those who are fighting for Ukraine today become enemies later? Speaking about what you shed blood for, with your war, with your defense, you were only delaying these peaceful processes. And in fact, if you hadn't fought, everything would have ended much faster and fewer people would have died.
No, there definitely won't be any such conversations.
Won't this kind of rhetoric eventually lead to that?
No, I've never heard anything like that, not even once. It's a different story with those TCC guys who grab people. They wear military uniforms, and that has really damaged the army's reputation overall. I don't want to idealize things. Not everyone in the army is good and not everyone else is bad. The army has all kinds of people. Some pre-war scoundrels are already appearing on the military scene, now in uniform and controlling the money flows. They're running from criminal cases because now in Ukraine and even before it was legally accepted. Joining the army puts your court cases on hold. So many with numerous charges joined since they couldn't get any more added. Despite all this, I respect the military. I have many acquaintances. I talk to them. I help, but I can't call such people good. Wearing a military uniform doesn't mean everyone is the same. Each person fights for their own reasons. Here's a man who is truly fighting for Ukraine. He went to defend his homeland. There are videos and photos where you can see this. An exhausted man with an untrimmed beard and hair. That's a man who is fighting for his homeland. But when you see a boy on air, fresh from the barber shop, shouting, "Everyone to the front, we have to fight to the end, we can't stop," that's a little different.
That's exactly what I'm asking. I've seen those men too, exhausted and worn out, sitting in the trenches, rotting. Yeah, and at the same time, they see those same bearded boys, but different ones, with those model beards from barber shops, like you said, somewhere in Germany or, I don't know, in Poland. The ones who talk about whether to fight or not to fight, whether they're patriotic or not. He sees how, for example, well, maybe not in Kyiv now, but before, maybe even in Kyiv, people were relaxing in restaurants and elsewhere while he's sitting in a trench, and honestly, it's unclear why. So what do you think? After all, these people will also come back sooner or later. We talk a lot about demobilization and those who are fighting for Russia now. Well, in the Russian armed forces, they will come back and it's unclear what will happen next. Well, there will be the same situation in Ukraine, and some people again say that this could push things and that very civil war could start in Ukraine.
Let me take a step back. There was a bit of a misunderstanding between us. By boys from the barbershop, I meant those in military uniforms serving in front of the cameras. In Israel, military personnel are never shown on television. It's banned. Here, we've turned it into a cult of hatred. Regarding your question, I've never heard that ordinary guy say anything like that. Maybe it bothers him inside, but there's no hatred toward these people since politicians allow this situation. Today, I posted a video from Bukovel at night, my time. You know, it's a famous ski resort in Ukraine.
Yes, of course.
It's just packed with thousands of men who came to relax. This is not an existential war. I'm not saying anything's wrong or unnecessary. This is business, this is politics, and it needs to stop. Concerts are happening, the football championship and other sports events are ongoing. Something feels off.
And those ones, the ones who...
Well, they all see this. Those who are in the trenches right now?
Yes, but let me put it another way. My own experience, the experience of my acquaintances. Talk to your own acquaintances. If you call the front line, it's for an ordinary man defending his homeland, not someone seeking attention or benefits on camera. 9 out of 10 say, do everything to avoid ending up here. And they've said this since day one. A sick commander, a brute, this is wrong. It doesn't exist. Everyone pays out of pocket. So what now? These men are waiting for peace, and that hasn't made them any less patriotic, and they are respected in society. It's hard to tell since everyone fears the territorial recruitment center. And the state did this. Neither the military nor the civilians are to blame here. The state did this, the scoundrels. In the first 6 months, our army was different. I mean, people actually idolized the military, but the state ruined it all.
And those people who come here to relax, I was just saying that this place is packed, right? What's the name of this place again?
Bukovel, a ski resort in western Ukraine.
Bukovel. Dennis, where are these people from?
From Ukraine, men under protection, privileged ones who make money from the war, among others. There are a lot of privileged people. Don't think otherwise, there are a huge number of people. It's just that some make a little money and some make a lot. I'll tell you a real life story. Spring of 2023, a year into the war, just an ordinary guy buys his 6th or 7th apartment in the city of Kyiv, and he's somehow involved with the front. Even back then. So for many people, that's true. He'll talk on camera about heroism, about how you need to stand strong until the end, but in reality, it's personally beneficial for him. He has found himself and earned money.
Please tell me. There are already statements from President Trump and Putin's reaction. Just ask Dennis. But you're commenting on events from 2 days ago before Vancouver, and it's like it takes 3 days for the giraffe to get it. What statements from President Trump are relevant, Dennis, and how has Putin responded?
I'm opening it right in front of you. I don't see anything.
We discussed it today.
Yes, we discussed it today. The latest statements were yesterday with Netanyahu. What is this person writing about?
And Peskov's statement. What nonsense is that?
And also the fact that Zelensky happened to be visiting Trump at the same time as Netanyahu. I'm not sure. Dennis, you already asked if it was a coincidence or arranged.
No, it's just a coincidence. But let me point out something else. There was an episode when, at a press conference, President Trump said the phrase, Putin wants to see a successful Ukraine, and Zelensky started laughing there. He began making faces as he always does. Yesterday, there was a similar episode when he told Netanyahu, I respect President Erdogan, Trump said on his own, and President Erdogan respects Israel and Netanyahu. Well, something like that. Netanyahu just watches this happen. Erdogan clearly dislikes both Israel and Netanyahu, but Netanyahu is a statesman. Some people like him, some don't, yet he acts appropriately. And when you make faces, I'll tell you even more. Do you know what they did in Ukraine? At the end of the Trump and Zelensky press conference. So, at the end, when it was over, they talked. They ended by overlaying the broadcast with the famous phrase, Russian warship, go there.
I heard that.
Tell us about it, Dennis.
So, why do this? It just helps the world in general, but why do it at all? But society is ecstatic, thrilled. During peace talks, the world's most influential person says, I'm ready to visit your country. These idiots still say Russian warship go there, but that's outdated now that we're close to peace. For what? To provoke? People are taking this in, becoming attached to these values, much like Putin did in Russia. We're in deep trouble, bankrupt, with nothing to fight with, and a cemetery a kilometer long. We've lost 25% of our territory, yet claim to have a nuclear missile and threaten to wipe everyone out. But we're left with nothing. But Russian warship go.
Yes.
Yes, unfortunately.
All of this part right here, what you just said, I saw that bit when Zelensky was there. What you just described, Zelensky is smirking and making it clear with his whole demeanor that Trump is talking nonsense. But Netanyahu, when they were talking about Erdogan, stood there completely unperturbed. This shows that Netanyahu understands what politics and diplomacy are, while Zelensky doesn't really.
He understands what diplomacy is and what consequences his wrong actions could have right now. If he brings up Trump or starts making faces like, "You're not Erdogan, this guy is a complete scoundrel," this will escalate the situation right now. Does Israel need this? By doing this, I risk the country. That's why Netanyahu won't, but Zelensky doesn't care. It's clear Putin doesn't want Ukraine to succeed. Trump says this because he needs to praise both sides right now, but can't come out. At negotiations, he'll say things like, "Putin is a scoundrel and Zelensky is a good guy, let's make peace." But he'll praise everyone since that's his role as a mediator. And that's what the situation requires today. And it's the same thing in Israel, between Gaza and Israel and the Muslim world in general.
Of course. Of course not. No doubt about it. That's right. No doubt. I just have one thing I don't understand in this whole situation regarding that Russian ship. And in general, I mean, ordinary people, Ukrainian people, the Ukrainian nation, they should want the war to end, not those who profit from the war. I know there are probably many such people, but there are others too. How do these people behave today?
Here, one doesn't exclude the other. In fact, the overwhelming majority, just the overwhelming majority. Trump referenced a figure of 91%, saying at Mar-a-Lago that 91% of Ukrainians support peace or something similar. But that doesn't rule out the fact that out of foolishness, this person still feels special. When he hears this phrase, or when Zelensky says, "Drop dead, Putin," damn, that's cool, we're awesome, but at the same time, give us money, give us money. Zelensky came on Fox News, what did he say? It's getting ridiculous. Putin has to give us money, and we have to decide how to use it. Everyone has to give us everything. I agree Russia should pay Ukraine, but I only trust the fund format Trump proposes to allocate that $100 billion for Ukraine's reconstruction. But the idea that Putin would voluntarily pay reparations, it's even funny to discuss it, but the fact is, Zelensky give, Europe give, America give, Putin give. But everyone just told them to get lost. We are great, but we're not really great. Our country is in crisis. We couldn't afford this war from the beginning and should have avoided it. Putin is an aggressor, but we didn't do everything to avoid this war. Zelensky, not us, Zelensky.
Well, yes, we've already talked about this topic in this situation, Dennis. Let me remind you, in this situation with Israel, Ukraine also asked Israel for help. At the same time, so to speak, voting against. This has been discussed a lot, and some people are probably no longer interested. But nevertheless, the fact remains. And here, Ukraine's position was unclear. Or maybe it's some kind of special diplomacy. So we ask, but we don't support you. Or maybe it's just some kind of, well, I don't know how to put it. An unwise decision, improper behavior, or some kind of mistake that Ukraine regrets today, right?
No, they don't regret it. That's typical behavior for Zelensky. He acted very brazenly. And do you understand what that leads to? At the beginning of the war, he traveled all over the world. In Britain, the king would come out. In Spain, the king would come out. They'd praise him saying, "You're great, you're Churchill." Boris Johnson would shout, "You're Churchill," inflating his ego. He began to believe he was Churchill, maybe even greater, and soon acted brazenly. And as for Israel in general, throughout Zelensky's entire presidency, that's been his foreign policy.
Tell me, please, this question was asked a long time ago, but I missed it. There's a story that Venediktov talked about on our show about how Bennett, the Israeli politician, once asked Putin not to touch Zelensky, and supposedly Putin agreed to it. How much does this story have the right to exist in Ukraine? Or do people think these are just fairy tales?
No, I remember this very clearly from the war, right at the beginning. I mention it from time to time, but I think about 90% of people don't remember it at all. I don't know.
But what? That's the question. What was Bennett's goal? Why are Zelensky's life and well-being so important to Israel?
Well, he actually volunteered back then. He offered to make Israel a platform for negotiations instead of Istanbul, instead of Minsk. He offered it as an alternative at the very beginning. I don't know. I don't like Bennett's politics, but probably in a civilized society, if you have opportunities, resources, connections, many people really try to help in some way. It's just that he doesn't like that there's a war going on. Maybe there are some other nuances, but for me, I don't see anything surprising in the fact that Israel offered itself as a mediator. They have relations with Russia. Well, they used to have better relations with Russia. 30% of the population are Russian-speaking immigrants. In Israel, there remains both a connection and a religious link. Well, I guess all of that together probably motivated me. Maybe Israel could have been the platform and things might have gone better.
Then I have another question for you on this topic. Let's suppose Israel, for some reason, wanted to save Zelensky's life. Why did Putin, so to speak, agree to this? And as they say again, this might be just stories, but most likely not, because serious people are talking about it. Why did Putin listen to Bennett and agree to this?
Well, probably not because he's a good guy, but because Bennett could do him some kind of favor in return, as often happens in politics. You scratch my back, I scratch yours.
Thank you, Dennis.
It's 9:36 in Vancouver, and we don't have much time left until the end of our broadcast. Well, usually at the end of the year, people sum things up and recall the most, let's say, memorable and important events that happened. So, Dennis, in this regard, I'd like to ask you, in your opinion, what was the most memorable political event for you personally this past year?
The inauguration of President Trump.
Uh-huh.
Yeah, I guess, maybe for me too.
Then the next question, the answer is probably already clear. Who, in your opinion, was the most prominent political figure this year?
Javier Milei.
That's interesting, yeah.
By the way, he's on my t-shirt.
I think Donald Trump, you'll answer why. They're together, but it's clear why.
Yes, he's in a much worse and much more complicated situation than Trump. And in general, this is a unique case.
Disappointment, Dennis. What's your main disappointment? Who disappointed you this year? I mean, among politicians.
I'd say Zelensky, but he already disappointed me.
Yes, I think you have been for a long time.
I'm not really disappointed in anyone.
And what event this year were you expecting that didn't happen?
I expected a framework agreement would be signed this year and they'd make it in time.
Uh-huh.
Listen, Dennis, I'll tell you, here it says that we're spreading some paid nonsense, like what we're saying is nonsense for those idiots who we don't spread it every day. But why paid? You know what I'm thinking about? When these fools write paid, I wonder, who do they mean? You, us, and who pays you? Well, I wouldn't mind if someone paid me, and you probably wouldn't either. But why is this so relevant, and why do they believe it so much and keep pushing this idea that people are being paid off?
First, they judge on their own. Second, indeed, in the post-Soviet space, that's exactly how it works. When a person goes on air and says something counter-revolutionary, something extraordinary like that. The truth, now seen as extremism in Ukraine, has long been viewed the same way in Russia. Then someone, it means, is immediately paying him. That's the kind of system we have. In America and Western civilization, it's different, but here it's like this, and we must break these stereotypes.
By the way, Dennis, about breaking stereotypes, at the beginning of the war, when it all just started, there was this, not exactly a trend, but how should I put it? Many people thought that you had to speak up all the time, that you had to express your point of view. For what? In order to convince people who are, let's say, on the other side to come over to your side. Don't you think that today it's already pointless to do this because, well, like 4 years have passed? Yes, it's like banging your head against a wall. So arguing with these people is pointless, just like they think the same about us, for example. Yes, arguing with you is pointless. You're like this, you're stupid, you're sheep, and so on and so forth. The fact is, today it's almost impossible to actually change someone's mind.
I have to tell you, if we're talking about those who write that Russia was defending itself, the special military operation, I'm not really doing all this for them. For Ukrainians, you can't imagine how many people have written to me over the years. At first, you made me angry, but over time, I observed how things unfolded. You were right. Then, sorry, I insulted you, you banned me, but you turned out to be right. Hundreds of people write things like this to me in my Telegram bot. I get hundreds of messages, and how many more people think this way but haven't written? That's why all of this is not in vain.
And what do you think, Dennis? Let's say, hypothetically, tomorrow the National Anti-Corruption Bureau of Ukraine releases another batch of phone conversations involving Volodymyr Zelensky himself, under some kind of code name, which in fact would overshadow what happened with Mindich. How much would that finally convince people that, well, at the very least, something needs to be done?
Let me say this. There won't be anyone new, because when people say we need Zelensky, who else? You saw how they reacted to Mindich in similar situations. No, they're stealing, but it's for victories.
Stealing for the sake of victory, yeah, of course.
Why are you doing this? Wait a second. Why are you, Dennis, telling lies? Well, Zelensky's ratings are very high, from 55 to 67% according to different polls. Let Dennis cite specific polls. Agencies that have a good reputation?
No one has a reputation in Ukraine. We don't have an institution of reputation here. On my Telegram channel, 20,000 people vote. Let's say Zelensky gets 1%. That's not representative, I admit it, just like all these corrupt sociological centers that exist in Ukraine. The employees are present, the men are protected, they won't report low ratings for Zelensky and are paid to manipulate people.
Speaking of being paid off, Dennis, you enjoy comfort, are far from the war, and stay warm. Only Ukrainians who are in Ukraine should decide, because they have borne the consequences for everyone.
So, I met the war in the city of Kyiv, lived through almost 8 months of war, directly in the area that was being bombed. My family lives in Ukraine under rockets, under bombings, under terrible bombings. My friends live under terrible bombings. Of course, I suffered losses not directly because of the war. No rocket personally destroyed anything of mine, but for political reasons. But still, because of this situation, I'm also fighting for the rights of the person writing this, but he doesn't get it. Do you see what I mean? This thesis from the president's office was likely written there as Podolyak is promoting the idea that only those in Ukraine should decide and that others are no longer Ukrainians.
And I also noticed, Dennis, that lately this rhetoric has been getting stronger and stronger. About who are you, why are you there, why aren't you here, so stay quiet. Only those who are here should decide.
They want in this way to prevent both the diaspora who left, let's say the pro-Ukrainian ones, and those whom Putin wants from voting. These 5 million people with Ukrainian passports in the annexed territories, they want to prevent anyone from voting. Let them decide inside Ukraine, and inside Ukraine people are in a cocoon of propaganda and they can be physically influenced. That's the kind of scheme. If they're going to do it, that's the only way.
About Milei, tell me, Dennis, is Javier Milei better off without Donald Trump?
Javier Milei, with or without Donald Trump, is a reformer. The numbers speak for themselves. Just go and look at the numbers. See how much inflation has decreased, the gross domestic product growth, the Argentine stock exchange, the percentage decrease in the ratio of poor to rich, and so on and so on. I could list these for an hour.
Well, yes.
Privatization.
I would like to see a conversation between Dennis and someone who is skeptical about libertarianism, for example, the philosopher Andriy Baumister, to better understand whether libertarianism is suitable for Ukraine.
I'm not avoiding discussion, but arguing over subtle ideological issues like left versus right isn't productive. As for libertarianism, if you dislike it, it doesn't exist in Ukraine and likely won't appear. Live in the system that exists. Enjoy Mindek, rockets, and Zelensky, Putin, and everything else. This is what your system has led to. I can't force anything on anyone.
Well, actually, for the most part, people here support you. We support Dennis. Very wise, reasonable, but a huge downside of Elisevich is that he gets offensive when he's criticized. Do you take criticism well or not really?
I never insult critics, and I've never seen anyone criticize me. How could they? Tell me, please, have I ever stolen anything from anyone? No, I have never held any position, participated in any tenders, or run for anything. No. Why criticize me? Because I'm fighting now for the citizens of Ukraine, for Ukraine's future, for its success. I've never seen any criticism of myself, not once. I've seen insults, yes, but as for you said something and it happened 2 months later, that's what I've seen.
What do you say about the idea, Dennis, that Ukraine, Belarus, and Russia can only prosper together?
That's complete nonsense. Ukraine, Russia, and Belarus can all prosper perfectly well on their own. Once all three countries are democratic.
You assume that each of these countries can return to democracy on its own, even Russia?
I'm convinced that'll happen in 5 years. And if you saw the reform program that, as it turned out, Kozak had, the one who worked for Putin, who now doesn't work for Putin, the New York Times published it. To be honest, I was really amazed, in a good way. Just take that program and Kozak's ideas. And this so-called liberal opposition, they don't stand a chance. And the main thing is that Kozak doesn't get killed, because after something like this, I really don't know. I don't even know where he is physically.
You mean so he doesn't get killed after what he said?
Well, of course, can you imagine? He told Putin directly that he doesn't see any point in capturing all of Ukraine and so on and so forth. Why? And he refused to follow his order. At that moment, Putin pressed a button to put the direct line on speaker so others could hear the audio.
To show what, Dennis?
What will happen to anyone who disobeys me?
Yeah.
A court in Ukraine has set bail for Deputy and Zelensky's friend Yuri Kisel, who's involved in a bribery case related to voting in the Rada.
I really wish everyone would find out. Everyone and everything and all these amounts. It's still just a tiny bit, just 1% of the whole thing. But what do I want? I'm just curious about their later arguments.
There you go. The deputy reported this when leaving the courthouse. That's right. Well, I'm just curious, will we see him, so to speak, at the next court hearing? It's like with Mindich, right? Whom the correspondent asked about, going back to that remarkable dialogue, to that interview. When he asked, how did you manage to leave? He said that actually it was a planned trip. He just took it and went, that's all.
Yes.
It's very simple.
An interesting point. I think this is from Zelensky's speech. If not, let me know, Dennis. Trump wants to triple the average salary in Ukraine, including by bringing American businesses into the market. If such a remark was made, then how can the people of Ukraine not like Trump, or how could he not suit them? If that's the case...
I'll finish watching Zelensky's interview. It's short. Maybe something like that was said on Fox News. I haven't seen quotes, but I'm sure Trump said it. I'm very glad that in the past month, Rubio, Kushner, Witkoff, and Trump himself have been talking about Ukraine's great success. Possible, though currently only theoretical, regarding the economy. I'm glad about that. In Ukraine, including Zelensky's parliament members like Mariana Bezuglaya, whom I mentioned on my stream, agree too. She spoke to Ukraine's main propagandist, Natalia Mosyachuk, who says Ukraine will never be the same. No economy, no life, nothing left. We will be a big Israel, but how it will be a big Israel, she didn't really explain, considering the size of the territory, just like that.
What does a big Israel mean? Explain, Dennis.
They don't realize Israel's gross domestic product is 4 times Ukraine's, and it's extremely successful economically. To them, Israel seems like a closed-off country that quietly fights non-stop, with everyone living in fear. But that's far from the truth.
Well, listen, do you really think that today, when information is open and there's the internet, they can still believe that Israel is this closed little country where everyone is afraid and no one lives a normal life?
Alexandra, it's a mystery to me as well. I could understand it when Goebbels worked for Hitler. Without the internet, without all of this, it was easy to fool people. But now it feels like people themselves are happy to be fooled and to believe in all of this. And still, I'll tell you, even a person who isn't stupid when they've been in this bubble for years, surrounded by it, and everything is just like this, it still somewhere slowly breaks through common sense. Well, I mean, in a negative way, it kills common sense.
Well, I understand, but Israel, which is known for innovation, medicine, and incredible achievements, out of 60 companies today related to intelligence, 16 are Israeli. Well, they can't not know all this, Dennis. They don't live in the woods.
No, many people don't know. They don't know about the startups that later go to NASDAQ. They don't know any of this. Propaganda has made them believe that Israel is just purely military.
Yeah, and this project today, we touched on it with you, this new Khazaria. Is this seen as a joke in Ukraine or taken seriously as a project?
No, well, for normal people, it's really a stretch. You could say it's a joke. But some of those abnormal people, they actually believe it seriously. Well, the internet helps spread it, of course. That's how they form their own interest groups.
Well, like the claim that Jews want to take over Ukraine, right? Dennis, you just said when Alexander and Dennis asked you that you don't shy away from discussions. What about Sergei Lyubarsky?
I didn't run away. I did 6 or 7 broadcasts with Lyubarsky, including 2 intense recent ones. I didn't go anywhere. It's another matter when a person goes public, let's put it that way, and says your dad was a deputy from the Party of Regions, a people's deputy, so that means you're a dodger, your family is pro-Russian. And basically, he made up all sorts of nonsense and crap about me, smeared my name, and then says, let me debate with Yelisevich. Well, that just doesn't add up.
It doesn't add up.
Show your evidence during the debate. But when you throw mud, well, you have to have no self-respect to go debate with him. And notice, no one else wants to debate with him for the same reason. He throws mud. And then I challenge him to a debate, Douglas-style debate.
Tell me, please, have there ever been any debates? I don't remember. You probably know better. I don't remember if Gennady Balashov and Sergei Lyubarsky ever had debates or not.
They didn't have debates, just one joint broadcast, after which Lyubarsky never invited him again.
Well, listen, when you have a discussion with Michael Naki, Dennis doesn't mind. He's mentioned it several times already. All that's left is to get Michael's agreement, and then we'll be happy to do it. Regarding Denis Elisevich and Yakov Kedmi, I spoke with Yakov, and Denis doesn't mind, but Yakov has, so to speak, given us some time, he said. After the new year, if Dennis doesn't change his mind, we will definitely organize it. Dennis interviewed either you or Dud.
Oh, well, isn't anyone going to invite a Sakti?
And one more thing, why is it pointless like that? I agree, it's pointless. Who knows where? In any case, I will also go in that direction, if you don't mind, to do something, and you Jews can't.
Alexander Stefanov, for example, was on Yuri Dud's show. Yes.
Do you know Sasha Stefanov? No.
No.
Do you know who that is? Yes?
Yes, I know who that is.
And at that time, he wasn't really like that.
I know, he had a pretty modest audience. Well, by those standards, yes, I know.
So...
Well, it's about, yes, the Jews want to take over.
About us, don't forget that.
Well, yes, Dennis said it right. When you go to Dudia, come to us. Here, Alexei Alexeyevich Venediktov was on Dudia. And someone else comes to us with pleasure. I really like that. I just can't remember who else. Denis was recently on Dudia and came to us too, besides Alexei Venediktov. Literally right after. Here's the interview with Dudia, then with us next time.
Svetov, and Svetov Sobchak was there. Not Svetov Sobchak was there.
Yes, Svetov Sobchak was there, and Kashin was also with someone else, with Gordieva. No, he wasn't.
Or maybe it was Latinina, I can't recall. Or maybe it wasn't even Latinina.
Wasn't Latinina?
Well, so to speak.
Well, it doesn't matter, yeah.
Dennis, dear, I want to congratulate you on the upcoming holidays. New Year is soon, Christmas just passed, and you celebrated your birthday a few days ago. I understand that you didn't celebrate with your family, who are in Ukraine, because you...
Well, of course.
It was probably like this, right? Maybe a video. We probably communicated.
Something like that. Yeah, thank you.
Dennis, I really want you to celebrate your next birthday, which is in December. And not like we're doing it now, but in a normal way so that you have the chance to hug each other. Thank you. Thank you, and for your family in Ukraine and those now with you in the United States. And today you were talking about how when people tell you to do this or that, like go to the front or go to Israel, well, basically all sorts of nonsense. I'm surprised by how you might get worked up, but you handle it very intelligently and behave yourself. Is it that, so to speak, you've already grown such thick skin over the years that you can react this way? Or is it because you always think about how to respond so you don't make the same faces as other Ukrainians do?
I'm used to it. I'll just say I'm used to it. Thank you for the wishes. I also congratulate you, Dennis, the whole audience, even the haters, but I'm used to it. I've heard so much nonsense and nastiness, when there's no real dirt, people really want to make something up. So no.
But I can see when you come, like right now. Dennis said the number reached nearly 3,000, mentioning figures from 2,000 up to 2,800. People watched live, yet someone claimed we never had anything like that. No, why not? We had that when Kazin and Shevchenko came and during debates. But the fact that Denis Yelizevich is popular on this channel is without a doubt. I even saw it myself. Our colleague Lyosha Stepanenko made separate videos. Yours are there too. Let's say a day passes and you get 20, 30, even 40,000 views, which may seem small to you since your channel often gets 100,000 or more. And that's the answer to the question of how important and interesting what Denis Elisevich says is, or not so much, no matter what someone writes somewhere. So growth to your channel. Subscribe to Denis Elisevich, by the way. I think you won't regret it on Radiov.
I'll put myself out there on Radiov too. Subscribe right away. I'll advertise myself.
Thank you very much, Dennis.
Thank you so much, Dennis. Happy upcoming holidays. Thank you. All the best. Thank you. Thank you.